speaker for today comes to us from right here in Central Florida, Sean Snaith. He is the director of the University of Central Florida Institute for Economic Competitiveness and is a nationally recognized economist in the field of business and economic forecasting. Now, he's an award-winning forecaster, researcher, and professor. He applies academic expertise to solve real-world problems. He has served as a consultant for local governments and multinational corporations such as Compaq, Dell, and IBM. Before joining UCF's College of Business Administration, he held teaching positions at Penn State, American University, the University of North Dakota, and the University of Pacific. Known for his engaging presentations, he's earned praise from one business editor. On economics, he is not only understandable, but interesting. So without further ado, let's bring up the understandable and the interesting Sean Snaith.
That's troubling. People see an economist, I figure the expectations are quite low, so I like to keep them that way. Solving real-world problems. I don't know if Linda's still here, but farmersonly.com would probably be a way to solve her problem. Happy to be here, and she should be the least person disconcerted by this countdown clock, right? I mean, she's from the Space Coast, so. I'm very disconcerted because it says 15 minutes, and I thought I had 45. Is that? Oh, yeah, it's going up. Okay, perfect. 2.5 hours. Well, thank you for being here. I guess I'll be speaking a little bit about the environment in which all of you will be plying your trade. We are now in the 7th year of the economic recovery, which began in the wake of the Great Recession, which was a historic recession in many ways, the worst recession since the Great Depression. And the recovery has been historic as well, historically weak. And it continues to be the case. We just saw today some data on retail sales that came out. They were down 0.2% in June. May's numbers were revised down. April's numbers were flat. So we continue to see a recovery that just is not gaining momentum. And you know, at this time of the year, of course, in Florida, we start paying attention to what's happening in the tropics. And as you well know, they give names to hurricanes and to tropical storms. They also give names to winter storms now. I don't know if you've been paying attention to this development. This was, I believe, an initiative started by the Weather Channel. And I have one of the Weather Channel stars pictured up there. If you can't see him, that's Jim Cantori. I don't know if you've seen this fella on the Weather Channel. And there's recently, there was a clip of him going around. He was reporting on a snowstorm, I think, up in New England, and there was thunder happening at the same time. It was thunder snow. And so Jim Cantori, every time it happened, would like start hopping around and hooting and hollering over thunder snow. But I think by naming winter storms, it sort of adds to the same drama that they get during hurricane season, because you can see the lust in the Weather Channel people's eyes during hurricane season. They love to get out there in the middle of that. I mean, I don't know where it stops, is with my concern. Do individual clouds start getting names? You know, cumulus cloud Charlie is going to pass over northern Jacksonville, causing shade. I mean, I don't know where it stops, but what I do know is we don't give names to economic recoveries. Sometimes we name recessions, but not very often do we name economic recoveries. And I propose a name for this particular economic recovery. I would call it the Lucy recovery. Named not after Lucille Ball, although we probably do have some explaining to do, but Lucy from the cartoon strip The Peanuts. And many of you certainly are familiar with this. One of the things she would repeatedly do to Charlie Brown is to entice him to try a kick a football that she would place hold for him. And every time it ended the same way. Just as he was about to lay into the ball, Lucy would pull back the ball, Charlie Brown would let out a scream, and he'd land up flat on his back wondering what happened. And it happened time and time again. This time I will hold it. And gullible Charlie always fell for it. This recovery in a lot of ways reminds me of this whole Lucy routine of pulling away the football. Many times we thought we were about to kick off into a nice high trajectory of growth, only to find ourselves lying flat on our back again during this recovery, wondering what had happened. Most recently, it happened last year. In 2014, we had very strong growth in the second and third quarter. 4.6% real GDP growth in the second, 5% in the third quarter. Wow, morning in America again, right? That's pretty robust growth. Well, what happened in the fourth quarter? Well, growth slipped back down to 2.2%, which is where it's been on average for the whole recovery. And then in the first quarter of this year, growth went negative, and the economy contracted by 0.2%. And here we are lying on our back, yet again, wondering what happened. I've talked about the sources of this, and I'll touch on it in a little bit again, but I think the role of uncertainty and policy-related uncertainty can't be understated in weighing down the economic recovery. And in particular, one of the big scar, I would say, on the economy, and have been saying that this would be the case for many years, is the labor market. And that scar is really very slow to fade. And every month we get a monthly report out of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and two numbers get all the attention in that report. There's lots of numbers in the report, but two get all the attention. The number of workers added to business payrolls in the previous month, or payroll employment, and then the headline unemployment rate. And so if you look at the chart here of where we've been as far as payroll employment is concerned, you can see we have recovered back to the level of payroll employment that we had prior to the recession. So I mean, that's a mark of progress, of course, but that doesn't mean that the labor market has fully healed. That just means we got back all that we had lost. It doesn't say anything about the jobs we should have been created in the meantime. And so while that payroll job growth does continue, the pace of that growth is not terribly strong. We had a couple of good months back in November. We had a very good jobs report, but it always seems to start slipping again and back to around 200 or so thousand jobs. Now, is that a lot? Is that a little? If you watch the coverage of this, you might think that the number, wow, it's a great number because economists were only expecting 180,000 and the actual number is 220,000. Well, I don't know if that's the best way to judge greatness as to whether or not the economists predicted it or not, but the way I look at those numbers is I put them in this context. I look at labor as a resource in our economy, right? You've got labor, you've got land, you've got capital, you've got technology. That, at a very aggregate level, is our economy, and we want to try to get the most we possibly can out of our scarce resources. We want to use our labor, our capital, to the best of our ability, using the best technology we have, so we can maximize the amount of goods and services we can produce out of these scarce resources. And so this chart up here looks at what economists call potential output of the U.S. economy. This is what we could be producing if we were achieving that goal of using our resources to the most efficient way we possibly can. And this chart depicts the potential labor force in the U.S. This is a line that represents, if we were fully utilizing the men and the women, their physical and mental labor of those who are capable of it, this is the level of employment that we would have in our economy. The red line here is that payroll jobs chart that you just saw in the previous slide. You can see there's still a gap here between payroll employment and our potential level of employment and the potential of our labor force. And so the question is, how long is it going to take us to close that gap? That, to me, is when the labor market's healed, when we have everybody that wants to work and is able to work in a full-time job in a job that they want. They in a full-time job, not working part-time, wishing they could work full-time, but using all that labor to its fullest potential. If you look at that gap, we're still significantly below our potential in the labor force. So 200,000 jobs, we've got a lot more to go to get back to our potential. And if we had continued to grow as quickly as we did in November, that was that big 353,000. We were just about to kick the football after that number came out, because it was in the wake of really robust GDP numbers. And wow, businesses hired 353,000 workers in November. If we could have stayed at that pace of hiring, which of course we did not, it would be August of next year when we get back to our full potential as far as the labor market's concerned. If we would continue on what the average job creation rate was for 2014, which was 246,000 jobs a month, we'd be back at our potential in August of 2017. So we're still at that pace 2 years off from really our labor market actually being completely healed. Unfortunately, we haven't continued to add jobs at that pace. Thus far in 2015, we've added about 208,000 jobs each month. That puts us on pace for an August 2018 or later return to full health, if you will, or return to our potential as far as the labor market's concerned. So really, when I see that number, I just do this sort of math. Well, okay, at that rate, how long is it going to take us to get there? Not whether or not we were surprised with that one particular month's number. And based on this, we still do have a way to go. The headline unemployment rate, this is the other number that gets all the attention. It's a little bit misleading, I think, in this particular economic recovery because of what's happening in the labor market. It's low. It's in the low 5% range right now. And I would say in most recoveries historically, if the labor market was reporting an unemployment rate at that level, you would say, well, we're pretty close to full employment. That's a sign of a healthy labor market, but it's misleading because of what's happening in the labor market this time around. The way that number is calculated, it's based on a survey. The Bureau of Labor Statistics completes a survey of households. They make a phone call. Hi, is Bob there? Yeah, this is Bob. Bob, are you currently working? No, I'm not. Next question. Bob, have you looked for a job in the past 4 weeks? If Bob says, no, I haven't looked in the past 4 weeks, he won't show up in this headline unemployment rate. In fact, he's counted as a discouraged worker. In fact, Bob giving up the job search, despite being unemployed, will actually cause that headline unemployment rate to go down. And so a lot of the declines in headline unemployment have been driven by this type of phenomena. There's another measure of unemployment that I really strongly advocate paying attention to, and that's not headline unemployment, which is U3, but U6, which is the broadest measure of unemployment that the Bureau of Labor Statistics puts out. U6 includes people like Bob, discouraged workers who have given up the job search. It includes people who are underemployed. They're working part-time, but they want to work full-time. It includes people who we call marginally attached to the labor force. They've looked for a job in the past year, would take a job if they were offered one, but are currently not working. When you look at that broader measure of unemployment, you're looking at a 10.8% unemployment rate now. And maybe more importantly is the difference between headline unemployment, U3 and U6. That gap has remained very wide by historical comparisons. Usually the gap between those two measures of unemployment in previous recoveries would be a lot smaller than it is here as we go into the 7th year of this recovery. I think there are a variety of reasons for that. I know time's a little short, so I'm not going to get into that, but I believe laws that have been passed, Dodd-Frank, the Affordable Care Act, I think these are impacting the labor market in ways that actually are prolonging this deeper healing. And the one thing in particular I think is a concern is this distinction between full and part-time workers in the Affordable Care Act and the requirements or lack of requirement to provide health care. If you're working 30 hours a week in a company of certain size, according to the law, you have to be provided health care that has the following list of benefits. If the company doesn't provide that, then they're fined. If you're in that same company, but you only work 29 hours, there's no need to provide health care by the company, nor are they fined for not doing so. So that puts a heck of a premium on that 30th hour. I mean, a tremendous premium. And businesses are aware of it, without question. I mean, there's software companies, you know, reaping in millions of dollars with scheduling software to prevent just that from happening, that person slipping from 29 to 30 hours. So there's really, I think, a real incentive to push towards part-time labor. And that's why it's important to pay attention to U6, because technically, headline payroll employment and the headline unemployment rate could get better if a full-time worker's job was split into two part-time workers' jobs. There'd be another person working the other half of that job hired by the company, so payroll employment went up. Payroll employment, there's no distinction between full and part-time. The unemployment rate could go down if that person that took the part-time job was previously unemployed, but U6 is not going to reflect all that because now I've got two underemployed people as a result of splitting that job into two. So it's going to be important to watch that going forward. Where do I think the U.S. economy is going? I think the next quarter, we're going to get a little bit of a bounce back here in the second quarter, maybe 2.5 after some data that I saw today, but not this big jump up to 4.6 that we saw last year. I think growth is going to remain subdued going forward. I also think that the Fed really is not going to have to move very quickly at this point, especially given these retail numbers, given what's happening overseas as well. Again, why? I think the consumer is a big reason why growth has been as weak as it has. 70% of GDP spending growth just has not accelerated in this recovery. It's gone in sort of fits and spurts, and then it pulls back. And that pattern, again, revealed itself today with the retail data that just came out. Oil prices, you know, this is interesting. Lower oil prices have sort of an arithmetic impact, such as decreasing the price of a gallon of gasoline. For every dollar decrease in the price of a barrel of oil, on average, gas goes down 2.5 cents per gallon. We spend less money on gasoline. Our gasoline bills as consumers go down. CPI inflation is reduced, and disposable income goes up. I mean, those are sort of automatic effects that occur when oil goes down. But more importantly, what are the economic effects of lower oil prices? And really, that depends on two things. One, how low do prices go? And two, how long do they stay there? Because temporary declines in prices, or temporary surges for that matter, are not going to have lasting economic impacts. And just doing some simulations of our U.S. forecast model give you some sense of what this means. A permanent decrease of $10 per barrel causes GDP growth to rise in the first year after that, but it rises even further in the second. So after time, these lower prices start to have a greater impact on economic activity. The same is true for employment. Payroll employment goes up in the initial year, but it goes up even further given that oil price decline sticks around over time. I think it affects consumer confidence. You know, gasoline prices are, I said, it's one of those things we're always aware of, even when you're not making a purchase. I mean, I have no idea what a gallon of milk costs, but I'll tell you Sunday when I go to Publix. But I can always tell you what a gallon of gasoline costs because it's there either cheering me up or bumming me out, depending on which direction it's going as I drive past it in my SUV. So, you know, higher prices, consumer confidence goes down. We saw that in 2008 when oil soared to $140 a barrel. If you plotted consumer confidence on that same graph, it was like a mirror image. You know. And when we break new ground, it's a bit of a double whammy. So when we went over the $4 a gallon mark the first time, yeah, that had like a double impact on consumer confidence. One other potential negative aspect here of lower oil prices is what is it going to do to domestic production? You know, we've had a tremendous boom in extraction of oil and gas from shale deposits, technological advances, hydraulic fracturing, and horizontal drilling, places like North Dakota and Texas and Marcellus and Pennsylvania and West Virginia. When prices of oil fall, the economics behind this type of drilling starts to become less favorable. And on average, I'm told, in the Bakken oil fields, a new well, the cost per barrel of extraction is about $55. So when oil prices fall to 45, as they did, suddenly we don't see as many new wells going into the ground. And so that has a downstream impact on manufacturing and certainly on employment in those states where it's taking place. And it's interesting. How many of you saw the movie The Promised Land? I'm very proud no one raised their hand. You were about to be shamed. It was a Matt Damon movie. It wasn't very good. It was about sort of the environment. It was a cautionary tale of the environmental dangers of fracking. We Bought a Zoo was much better than it, and that should say a lot right there. But interestingly enough, the Promised Land was underwritten by the United Arab Emirates. Yeah, they're a member of the OPEC organization, and so I thought that was interesting. Why would they support a movie like that? But that point was hammered home when OPEC has met, and they met actually right when oil was at its recent low point, and they took no action to raise oil prices. And at first I thought, wow, that's interesting, because these governments budget based on $85, $90, $100 a barrel oil, but yet they're just not going to do anything to try to raise prices. And then I thought about it. I said, I think they've come to the realization that propaganda is a far less effective tool than low prices as far as stemming the threat that U.S. domestic production places on the oil industry. Greece and the euro, is this the real time, 1 minute, 20 seconds? No? Okay. I'm just going to ignore all that. Greece, it's not over. I know if you thought this was this latest round of negotiations and the deal that Greece accepted, if you thought that was going to solve everything, I don't want to disappoint you. This will come back up again. The latest package is far more difficult and painful than the package that the Greek people voted to reject in the referendum. So I don't see this ever actually being implemented. It may have delayed yet again Greece leaving the euro, but you know, the method of exit for the euro, I believe, is going to be via ballots rather than bonds. You know, the bond market, that financial contagion, the European Central Bank, I think, has been able to stop that from sort of hyper running out of driving people out of the out of the euro currency, sort of at the speed of financial markets. But what's happening instead is, you know, some more extreme political ideology is starting to gain ground in these countries because of the economic situation. I mean, Greece has a 25% unemployment rate, a 50% youth unemployment rate. And that is really fertile ground for some more extreme ideas to get into office. And Portugal and Spain are in similar situations, as is Italy, with high rates of unemployment. So I think Greece actually will be out of the euro at some point. I think they've just delayed it yet again, as they have for 5 years now. But I think ultimately it's inevitable. The pain of exit, I think, is more palatable than enduring what it's going to take to stay. Whoop, can I go back? There we go. Now, if you've heard me speak before, I've always been a big fan of Sky Mall. But they're in bankruptcy. I don't know if you heard this news. Yeah, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I mean, I read a lot of economic reports in the business pages, but boy, when I read that, I mean, I welled up. I'm not going to lie. I'm not ashamed of the emotions I felt. And so I took a flight not long after I read the news, and sure enough, seatback pouch did not contain a Sky Mall magazine. And I just like, what am I going to do? What do you do when you don't have Sky Mall to look at in a plane? But so I was pretty despondent. But they do have Wi-Fi on planes now. And so I did that, and I thought, I wonder if they still have a website, you know? And so I was scared to find the answer. But I typed in www.skymall.com and pressed enter, and sure enough, Sky Mall's website is still up and running amidst the bankruptcy proceedings. So that was uplifting. I just want to share a little what I found on the website here shortly. But I wonder if the bankruptcy of SkyMall will put an end to SkyMall policies. That was a phrase I coined, triggered by a purchase I made one time in SkyMall. And a SkyMall policy is an expensive policy that doesn't deliver its expected or predicted outcome. And I've had a list of those over the years. One in particular, remember the 2009 Foreclosure Prevention Act? Yeah. It was stated at the time it was going to stop the wave of foreclosures that was spreading across the U.S. country. Well, you know, we're still able to hang 10 on that particular wave, so I don't think it worked out. But I got to the website, so I mean, that sort of lifted my spirits a little bit, and I started to look through, and I came across this item. And my first inclination was, oh man, you know, SkyMall's getting pretty desperate, you know, with this bankruptcy. They're trying to push a 50 Shades of Grey branded line of products and, you know, maybe lift themselves out of bankruptcy that way. But no, that's not what that is. That's actually to stretch your back, you know, because I don't know how you could stretch your back without this giant apparatus in your house, but that's what it's for. So I don't know how they're going bankrupt. I can't understand. This one, well, what it is, it looks like a combination carry-on luggage and scooter. And our intrepid hipster here, as you can see, is scooting his way past the taxi, and I guess he's going to go all the way home here on his carry-on bag. But I haven't seen any of these in OIA, so I don't know. I don't know how popular they are, but that's not a bad idea right there. You don't need the light on. Is the seat up? Is it down? All these problems solved, you know, with a glow-in-the-dark toilet seat. Well, this one, I guess I was a little bit disturbed, more about the future of Western civilization. This is a grill bar, which is, yeah, it's a grill top equivalent of the Roomba, which is that little robot vacuum cleaner that just goes around and sweeps your carpets. And if your cat takes a ride on it, it's very popular on social media. But this is to clean your grill top. You know, you set this grill bar on it, and it goes and cleans your grill for you. I mean, because who has time, really, to run a brush across that 2-foot by 2-foot square grates? You really need that. That sure is just too odious. But this one's interesting. It's a portable hot tub. Never really occurred to me that you want to have a portable hot tub, but the way it works here, there's a tub here, and then there's a coil of pipes that the water, I guess, circulates through, and there's a fire there in the middle of those pipes to heat up the water, and there's a little ash bin to catch the ashes, and I guess that's how you get the hot water in your jacuzzi. I said, wow, yeah, it's kind of interesting to me. I'm going to click a little deeper, and there was another picture once I clicked on the product here. And it's a young woman and her infant and toddler children who are enjoying the portable hot tub. But the picture's a little more disturbing as you look at it, isn't it? Because mom's drinking Merlot 2 glasses at a time. The fire is out of control at this point. Mom has taken down the heat shield that came with the product, right? There's supposed to be a protective shield there, but mom took that down for some reason, so this poor girl is in danger of being burned. Not to mention the water looks like it's at a rolling boil at this point, because I don't know what else would cause the bubbles other than the fact the water is boiling. But anyway, I don't think this is going to win any safety awards. Let's talk about Florida a little bit. Florida's housing market really at the core of what happened in our economy, both in terms of the dramatic recession that we had and playing an important role here in our recovery. We're seeing in price appreciation, mainly in the single digits, but the past few months actually, price appreciation has jumped up into double digits according to Florida Realtor data. There's still a relatively high level of investor activity as gauged by cash transactions. And I still believe housing finance is an issue and will be an issue going forward because mortgage availability, that pendulum has swung from one extreme to the other, and we really need something in the middle to support a housing market that's not as investor dependent. I am going to try to go a little quickly here to try to stay true to the time. But these are sales from the Florida Realtors of single-family existing homes, monthly sales in blue, 12-month moving average in red. And, it's been a steady upward trend. I mean, there's been a lot of bumps along the way, but transactions certainly have continued to pick up. Prices, we've definitely seen an upturn here, but you can see the 12-month moving average here has flattened out a bit over the past year or so because price appreciation during that time had dropped down into the single digits, but really still a long way away from the peak of housing prices in Florida. And so there still is a significant number of people who are underwater in their mortgages in Florida. That impacts mobility and continues to weigh on those consumers' spending behavior. As you can see, sales are up. Again, we see this double-digit price appreciation. I mean, actually, if you look a little deeper into the number, traditional sales, finance sales, those prices are not rising at double digits. They're rising around 4% or so. But if you look at REOs, short sales, and foreclosures, the price appreciation on those, because that pool is shrinking. That pool of distressed property is shrinking, and I think the number of housing investors has been rising, and so they're bidding up prices. You're seeing foreclosure prices go up 16% year over year. And so when you average that all together, I think it's pushing that number up, but the traditional housing is not seeing that double-digit price hike. Inventory still remains low. Housing starts have been really flat the past couple of years, and the fundamentals, demographics and job growth, drivers of housing demand, I think we're behind the ball here a bit as far as getting new product onto the market, and that low level of inventory shows you just how tight the market is. Housing starts and mortgage rates, I think rates will start to pick up. I don't think the Fed's going to move before 2016, especially in light of the data today. There really is no reason for them to feel any sense of urgency as far as the economy is concerned and as far as inflation beginning to take root, because there's just no sign. Population growth, the key driver of our economy is back, and that's been one of the main reasons I think we've seen the recovery taking place. And during the financial crisis, that influx stopped and that source of growth stopped. And really that's, the surest way to grow your economy is to bring more people into it. That means more economic activity, that means more business activity, and that means your economy is going to grow. So I think the demographics are still strong for Florida, and I think this will be a key driver of growth here for some time to come. Unemployment rates, more or less around the national rate. Bringing it down from here, I think, is really difficult, just because as the labor market improves in Florida, we're seeing more people enter the labor force. People that may have dropped out because they couldn't find a job are becoming encouraged to look once again, and that's the reverse situation. That actually can cause your unemployment rate to go up, which is a sign that the economy's healing. If unemployment's rising because more people are entering the labor force because they believe they're going to find jobs, that's seems a little contradictory, but an unemployment rate going up for that reason is actually a positive development. Florida's recession lasted 2.5 years longer than the national recovery. The data that came out last summer that showed that. So the U.S. economy left a recession in June of 2009. In Florida, both 2010 and 2011, the economy contracted in the state. So we were still in a recession. But since then, the turnaround's been pretty dramatic. So we went from lagging the U.S. economy, both in terms of economic growth and job growth, as well, to being significantly out ahead of the U.S. economy. So you're in a good state in that regard in terms of how the recovery is playing itself out now. It was a tough place to be the first 2.5 years, certainly, as the economy continued to contract. So payroll employment on the rise. We're seeing pretty good job growth here in Florida. We're just about at pre-recession levels of employment, but as I said, the pace of growth is looking pretty solid and well ahead of the national unemployment rate. Construction, of course, played a huge role in job losses during the recession and the housing markets collapse. Over 340,000 jobs in this sector were lost. Professional business services, this was the first sector that lost jobs to get back to pre-recession levels, largely white-collar jobs, science, technology, accounting, management of companies, lawyers, and people in waste management. I still don't know why that's in there. It's an opportunity to insert a lawyer joke, I guess. Leisure and hospitality, early on, this was a creator of jobs early in Florida as well. It wasn't even our recovery yet because the economy was still contracting, but leisure and hospitality were adding jobs. That's continued to be the case. I do think we'll see a little deceleration in terms of job growth there, but that's a big sector in our economy, and it's getting bigger. And so that makes diversifying a more difficult task, most certainly, but it certainly has been an important part of the recovery. Job growth going forward through 2018 on average. Construction, again, that's off of a much lower base of employment, but still a high growth rate. Professional business services, trade, leisure, still up there. Health, 2.6. These are all pretty robust growth rates, and all of them are well above what we're seeing at the national level. So that is the outlook. In terms of population growth, looking at the various metros we cover in our Florida forecast, you can see growth in different parts of the state. Naples is growing very rapidly. A lot of that's been fueled by the run-up in financial markets, and wealthy retirees whose decisions are based on portfolios have been able to do implement those retirement plans, and Naples and Southwest Florida has benefited from it. Here in Orlando, we've got pretty rapid population growth, fastest of the major metros, and job growth, as you can see, sort of follows that population growth as well. 2.6 on average through the next 3 years. That growth is going to slow as we go out, and the Fed actually does begin raising rates and pulling back a little bit on economic growth, but we still stay well above where the nation is forecast to be as far as job creation is concerned. And so it's, I think, a pretty good environment to do economic development, certainly a lot better than it was in 2008, 2009. And I thank you all for fitting me in on the program, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.